confirm that it's working. And it looks like everything's working. So, all right, let's continue our lecture. Last time we actually did this slide, so we'll just do it again for the sake of consistency. Uh, Phylum Arthropoda is probably the most successful phylum when it comes to number of species. There's more than 1 million species of arthropods just described. So that's not even all of them because we find new species of arthropods all the time. And that represents almost 2/3 of all described species. Arthropods are of extreme economic importance, right? They are agricultural pests. They are also good for agriculture. They are uh, disease spreaders. They are pollinators. So there's lots of different sort of economic impacts arthropods can have. They have segmented bodies. Depending on the class of arthropods or the clade, you'll generally see between 2 and 3 segments. Um, these segments are generally consist of body segments and a very distinct head with specialized sensory organs. So you're going to see jointed appendages. This is because of the exoskeleton. So the exoskeleton uh, has is made of protein and chitin. So we'll skip over here to the exoskeleton. It's a matrix, a non-cellular, right? Remember, this is a matrix, a non-cellular matrix of protein and chitin that has to be shed. Ecdysis. So, um, it is a hollow exoskeleton. So if you look at the jointed appendages, we need those joints in the exoskeleton to be able to move, right? Muscular connections that move the joints will be within, on the inside of the exoskeleton, like that. So, if you need to move the joints, you contract muscles surrounding the joints. So the muscles are attached inside in order to provide locomotion. So we have all those jointed appendages. And these jointed appendages provide multiple means of locomotion. We've got flying, we've got swimming, right? We've got climbing, crawling, jumping, lots of different types of locomotion. All over the map on that. Just about any way they can move, you'll find an arthropod that can move that way. They have modifications to their exoskeleton and their jointed appendages for sensation. For instance, the antenna is a jointed appendage, and it generally has sensory structures on it like hairs that can do a number of different things. They can sense vibrations in the air, right, to detect various things around them. They can sense sound. They even generally have chemoreceptors on them as well to do what is analogous, I suppose, to smelling. And of course, we also have on that specialized head mouth parts of various types, right? So you're going to find mouth parts for chewing, puncturing. Uh, you have in some clades of arthropods fangs. It is worth noting that this is not the term we want to use. when we're talking in the actual science of biology, because fangs are teeth. Teeth are mineralized, bony structures. Arthropods don't got that. So I'm going to say chelicera. There's the plural. Um, so they have a variety of different mouth parts as well, modified for whatever ecological niche they're in. So this exoskeleton, continuing on, we already mentioned the non-cellular matrix of protein and chitin. This is a hard structure. Very hard, very heavy, right? This provides them with protection. It provides them with attachment for muscle. So muscle attachment points to move those jointed appendages. Protection to keep them from being destroyed so easily. But the big disadvantage of having an exoskeleton comes when you have to consider growth and respiration. So, growth and respiration. I need more space. Let's get this slide here and we'll just create a little blank spot real quick. So, when it comes to growing, an exoskeleton prevents size increases. So you cannot get just larger when you have an exoskeleton. So, of course, ecdysis is the solution to that, shedding of an acellular covering like an exoskeleton. But following ecdysis, an arthropod is very vulnerable because their exoskeleton is extremely soft. It takes time for the exoskeleton to harden back up. Now, the other big problem is respiration. Right? So, when you have your arthropod, maybe it's, there we go, an ant, why not? Because that's your standard. You have to get oxygen, atmospheric oxygen, into the exoskeleton and then supply it to all the body tissues, right? The problem with this being that if you just have a very porous exoskeleton, not very protective. So, depending on the clade of arthropods, they'll have various different types of structures. Ants will have little tubes that connect, and they're little networks of tubes. Uh, and these little spiracles can pump oxygen a little bit, but due to the small size of these tubules, we can't get a lot of efficient oxygen movement. And this means that there is a maximum size for arthropods, right? There is a size at which the arthropod becomes too large for oxygen to reach the body tissues. So, the exoskeleton is this amazing structure which allows for lots of different locomotor things, lots of different sensory structures, mouth parts, but at the same time, it restricts the size of the organism, and when it sheds, it's extremely vulnerable. So, not ideal necessarily. It also puts a limit on the size of an arthropod, in part because, well, there's only so much muscle you can attach in a jointed appendage, and the larger an organism is, the more muscle they need to move that heavy jointed appendage. So, uh, that's another restrictor on maximum size. So about the largest arthropods you'll see are like the Goliath bird eater spiders. Uh, tarantulas, I guess. I don't want to say spider when I mean tarantula. Okay, so we just said this. They must molt in order to grow. They must undergo ecdysis, and following ecdysis, following molting their exoskeleton, they are quite vulnerable. And the other thing about this is that ecdysis is energetically expensive. Energetically expensive. They have to spend a lot of energy on molting and growing after their molt before their body hardens up. Now, arthropods have an open circulatory system with blood sinuses. So that means that their heart is connected up to a small amount of vessel, but that you have these large open areas where their various internal organs are, and it just bathes the blood in a mixture of deoxygenated and oxygenated blood. So, not as nice and efficient as a closed circulatory system, which, you know, pumps deoxygenated blood directly to the oxygenation structures, such that you're always pumping oxygenated blood to your body organs. It's pretty nice. They have different respiratory modes. As I said, that ant or this cricket has um, trachea, these tubes running through the body. So they'll have small openings on the sides, on the surface of the exoskeleton, spiracles. So spiracles are these small openings. And then these small openings lead to trachea, which are kind of similar to what you think of when you say trachea in a human. Branching tubes that feed the oxygen into the internal structure. There's going to be actually muscles associated with these so that you can do some very rudimentary pumping. These muscles will allow the trachea to widen and contract, which allows the oxygen to get pumped through the body and then diffuse a little more easily into the tissues. So, the spiracles are the openings, air moves via trachea, and it must, from the trachea, diffuse into the body tissues. This is extremely efficient because oxygen is going straight from the air to the body tissues, and then the blood just mixes things around. So we don't have to worry too much about getting blood to the respiratory structure since it's just throughout the body. There are arthropods that have some very primitive lungs. We call them book lungs, and we'll talk about them when we get there. Arthropods have, compared to a lot of the invertebrates, a relatively complicated nervous system. Um, they tend to have their nervous system described as ganglial clusters. Ah, so, yeah, let's just erase some stuff here. Whoa, come back now. And erase all ink. Okay, so we have these clusters of ganglia, nerves. In general, you'll have an anterior cluster. You might think of this as analogous to a brain, but I wouldn't say it's quite like that. So we'll just slap quotes around brain because, in fact, a lot of arthropods can lose their anterior end ganglia and not really be too affected. They also have uh, generally secondary ganglionic clusters. So they'll have additional clusters of ganglia. Um, there'll be nodes along the belly, so ventral nodes, and they have a ventral nerve cord that connects up to all the muscles. So they have clusters of ganglia, not so much a brain. Cockroaches, if you cut the head off of a cockroach, it will not be able to see, it will not be able to eat, and it will not get information from its antenna. That's about all that will happen. The cockroach will still be quite mobile and it will run around and everything. Um, if you are very careful and just cut out the brain, then you can simply uh, just have a animal that can still eat and can still move and can still mate. They honestly don't need the anterior ganglia for much. All it does is really connect to the sensory structures. Okay, the excretory system consists of what we call the Malpighian tubules. Malpighian tubules are little projections out from the digestive tract. So, projections from the digestive tract, and basically these eliminate nitrogenous wastes. So, uric acid is a big one that they eliminate, and guanine. These are both waste compounds. This is a key adaptation for becoming a land arthropod because they allow them to excrete wastes without excreting waters and salts that are important. Hello to my nephew Kai. All right. Another big structure of arthropods is a diversity in eyes. So, the big one most people know is the compound eye. So the compound eye is made of repeating units of lenses. So they have a little lens and then it tessellates with additional lenses. So you just have these repeating tessellated units of lenses that allow them to perceive significantly larger fields of view. So you can have uh, many insects exhibit the compound eye. Um, Crustaceans also tend to have a compound eye. Crustaceans are things like lobsters and shrimp. Then you have house centipedes that have a compound eye. And then some of our earliest fossils that show the compound eye include the trilobites. So, small marine arthropods. This compound tessellated lens, again, offers near 360 degrees of visual movement. What's kind of cool is that inside there, because in humans we have eye muscles that move our eyeballs around. We can look up, around, side to side, right? Uh, Arthropod eyes are immobile. They are a structure that is made up of exoskeleton. They shed the compound eye when they molt. Okay? So, in order to change where the arthropod is looking, the retina is actually tissue on sort of a little movable stalk. So, this stalk can sort of move around in the compound eye to change where the focus is. which is kind of cool. Okay, compound eye is amazing, but not all animals have an eye made up of thousands of repeating visual units. Um, some arthropods have ocelli. Now, ocelli is what we call a simple eye. So it is a single lens with a retina underneath. Um, there are arthropods that have both compound eyes and ocelli. Ocelli generally, when you find them in addition to compound eyes, are involved in just light versus dark. So they detect light and then they assist in stabilizing the organism while it's on the horizontal plane. Right. My particular favorite clade of arthropods is the Chelicerata, the chelicerates. Chelicerates are seen are animals with chelicera. The big thing in chelicerates, the big key adaptation here, is the chelicera. You probably think fang, right? So this is what a lot of people would call arachnids. Um, in biology, we say chelicerids. Spiders, right? Spiders, scorpions, ticks, mites, harvestmen, daddy long legs, lots of different organisms. Around 57,000 species. And these are almost, well, not almost entirely, but the largest proportion of these are terrestrial arthropods. So, not a lot of aquatic chelicerates out there. They have 6 pairs of appendages. 6 pairs of appendages. Now, you might have thought 8, but remember, these are just paired appendages, not legs. So we have 4 pairs of walking legs. So that's the 8 legs of the arachnids. However, we have an additional pair of sort of manipulating legs. So these are called the pedipalps. You can find these right by the chelicera, the actual fangs. They're pretty cool. They just sort of like. Uh, they can be used in cleaning. So if you need to clean the face, clean off the eyes, you have pedipalps to do that. And then, of course, you have the actual chelicera, right? Chelicera are what a lot of people say are fangs, but remember, fangs are teeth, mineralized bony structures. Chelicera are our fangs. Now, we do not have a compound eye in Chelicerata. So there is no compound eye, and there's no antenna, and there's no mandibles. So mandibles, think about your jaw. These mandibles are structures for chewing or, mechanically processing your food. So mechanical food breakdown. They do not have mandibles to do that. So instead, they have various degrees of venom. So they can have venom glands, and they pierce something with their chelicera and inject venom into the prey. And then the venom will digest the prey. Uh, it has been secondarily lost in ticks and mites, so not a big deal there. When we talk about the body, we don't say segments, we say tagmata. Let me clear off all this stuff again. Ran out of space. So, the tagmata are. Whoa, come back here. Give me my pen back. The tagmata are our body segments. They are specialized body segments. If you compare a chelicerate to an insect, insects have 3 body segments. A chelicerate tends to have 2 body segments. The first is the cephalothorax. So the cephalothorax. Ceph being our prefix meaning head, thorax being our mid-body. So the cephalothorax is a fusion of a head and body segment. So you will find both the head and the walking legs attached to the cephalothorax. Then attached to the cephalothorax, we have the big abdomen. So you have your cephalothorax, where you have your walking legs and your head, and you have your big old abdomen. There's no walking appendages attached to the abdomen. Abdomen is generally devoted to the end of the digestive system. You'll generally find some part of the circulatory system in the abdomen. The spinnerets for web weaving chelicerates, and often the reproductive structures. So, pretty cool. Spiders have book lungs. So, unlike the trachea, which are little tubes that connect up to an opening called a spiracle, and you just have a small amount of muscle that can dilate or constrict the trachea. Arthropods, like the spiders, have an actual pumping structure. So, the book lung is a pumping structure, and it also allows respiration from one site. So instead of having spiracles, openings all along the exoskeleton, the book lung allows for openings in one spot. This is also one of the reasons why you have to more thoroughly spray a chelicerate with an insecticide if you're trying to kill it. Although why you're trying to kill it is Greek to me, because they are just cute. I mean, I think bed bugs are technically a chelicerate, so those can all die as far as I'm concerned. Okay, now we have subphylum Myriapoda, and this has 2 classes in it: Chilopoda and Diplopoda. So chilopods are distinguished by the presence of a chelicera. So they have their fangs, venomous fangs. Diplopoda are distinguished by the fact that on each body segment they have 2 walking legs on either side. So 2 pairs of walking legs on each body segment. The chilopods are the centipedes, and the diplopods are the millipedes. General characteristics shared by both Chilopoda and Diplopoda. We have a specialized head, right, with uh, structures for consuming food and sensory structures, right? Then we have numerous segments. So a large number of segments, depending on the length of the organism. So we have a truly segmented body with repeating anatomical units in it. All the chylopods and diplopods have separate sexes, so males and females. They practice internal fertilization. The males will deposit their sperm into the female's gonadopore, and they lay external eggs. Centipedes, the chylopods, are obligate carnivores. They must consume other organisms. And they do this by piercing them with their chelicera and injecting venom. Right? They have a single pair of walking legs per segment. So if you look at a body segment, they will have a single pair of walking legs coming off of that segment. Obligate carnivores and venomous. I wrote poisonous. Bad me. Some of them might be poisonous to consume. It is worth noting venom is injected into something. Poison is exposed to something. You get poison on your skin. You swallow poison. A spider injects you with venom. So, while there are certainly centipedes out there that are probably poisonous, what comes out of their chelicera is 100% venom. Good for capturing prey and good for defense. Right? These are actually modified legs, appendages that were once legs. They're pretty cool. This is a giant cave centipede. So these are a South American centipede, and they hang onto the surface, the ceiling of a cave with their rearmost walking legs, hang most of their body into the air, and their whole deal is to catch bats as they fly home. So they are bat-eating giant cave centipedes. So if you go into a cave where these are known to be, maybe duck. Then we have Diplopoda, the millipedes. Diplopoda. I like Diplopoda. Um, I have this cool picture of a pill millipede. However, roly-polies are not Diplopoda. So, very different. All right. Each body segment of a millipede has two walking legs. Right? This indicates that it is actually a fusion of two body segments. So you had two individual body segments, each with one walking leg, and then you had some kind of fusion event to create a body segment that has two pairs of walking legs. Now, a big thing about diplopods, the millipedes, is that they are herbivorous, consuming plant material and various detritus, decaying vegetation, fungus, and so on. They have a variety of adaptations for defense, right? They can produce an amazing diversity of defensive chemicals. Some of them simply smell foul or taste very foul. So that's a basic defense against predation. However, some are even more fancy than that. There's a centipede that can actually secrete. Where are you? Okay. There's a centipede that can secrete cyanide, which is pretty cool. So, we have centipedes that can secrete or even outgas some cyanide. So, whether it's a liquid or actually secreting a small amount of gaseous cyanide, they can certainly protect themselves that way. Those ones actually secrete it out by their head. So, really cool. Uh, Others can not just have foul smells and foul taste, but you can also have chemicals that are irritants. So, millipedes have a stunning variety of defensive capabilities. There's actually species of lemurs in Madagascar that have been observed picking up millipedes, poking them in order to get them to secrete their defensive chemicals, and then rubbing the defensive chemicals on their fur. There's a lot of hypotheses as to why they might rub millipede defenses on their fur. Perhaps it repels other insects. Some people even hypothesize that maybe there's a psychoactive hallucinatory effect that the lemurs are after. Either way, millipedes are super cool. Now, the largest class of arthropoda are the hexapods. Hex, six, pod, feet, right? So this is insects. The largest class of organisms on Earth. So, class Hexapoda. They are primarily terrestrial. Um, there's just an insane number of hexapod species. Uh, and thus, estimates for the number of hexapods alive on the planet at any given time is around 10 to the 18th, or 1 followed by 18 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Then we gotta add our commas in there. And it's obviously a number for which I have no word off the top of my head to have. But one something. Um, if you had this as a measurement of distance, it'd be about 100 light years, the distance to one of our closest stars. So, um, very large number of individuals alive at any given time. All right, hexapods. Three distinct body segments, right? We have a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. A distinct head, a distinct thorax, and a distinct abdomen. Right? They have, for the most part, compound eyes on their head. So those large compound eyes that allow them to see in almost 360 degrees field of view around them. They can have several ocelli, simple eyes. Oh, I don't remember if I mentioned it, but chelicerates only have ocelli, which is very cool. So, spiders and their cousins, their eyes are all ocelli. So, one of the reasons spiders have all those eyes is because they'll have eyes adapted to different functions. For instance, your average jumping spider uh, has multiple eyes, right? This is the face of a jumping spider. Right? They have their little chelicera, and then they'll have two very large forward-facing ocelli. Right? Those large forward-facing ocelli are good for depth perception. Right? Then they tend to have sets of ocelli on the sides and on the top of their head. And some are for movement. And so we have fine focus. We have different ocelli for different purposes. So maybe you have a pair here, I think. 2, 4, 6, 8. Yeah, I think that's generally the jumping spider eye setup. So different ocelli serving different functions. Ocelli adapted for targeting, sensing depth, all that stuff that a jumping spider needs to do. But it's all ocelli, no compound eyes. Whereas our insects, our hexapods, generally have compound eyes and may have ocelli as well, all on that distinct head. They all have wings or had wings. So a big feature, a key trait of the hexapods is wings. So there's some variation in here. Some species have a secondary loss of wings, and some species in their evolutionary lineage appear to have never evolved wings. So you have some species that have a secondary loss of wings, some species that have never evolved wings. But most hexapods have wings to a certain degree. You generally have 2 pairs of wings when present. So sometimes they're fused together like your pretty little butterfly, right? Sometimes a pair of wings has been reduced to something that doesn't even look like wings. So you'll have big old wings and then some reduced structures there, generally for stabilization during flight. So pretty crazy. These wings are not homologous to legs. These are not these are not homologous with legs of other organisms, especially vertebrates, and they're certainly not homologous to bird or mammal wings. Like I said, in some organisms we have a secondary loss of wings. Fleas don't have wings. Lice don't have wings, but their closest living ancestors and fossils indicate that their ancestors had wings. And some have never evolved wings. As I said, their evolutionary lineage just doesn't include wings. Silverfish is the big example here. A silly name for a hexapod. Then, of course, we have a variety of things. Beetles. If you look at a beetle, right, with a little antenna and its body, right, they have a single pair of wings. And you say, well, I thought you said they're paired, but if you look at a beetle when it flies, it lifts up its hard covering, right? In a ladybug, that's what's red with the dots, and it has to lift that up in order to unfold its wings. Well, that hard covering is modified wings. So, in beetles, the wings have evolved a protective function to cover the back wings. And the back wings are the only ones that are used in flight. And then in flies, we have halteres. And that's what I was illustrating right here, which are these small reduced structures for balancing during flight. Flies have very acrobatic flying skills, and those halteres keep them balanced. Uh, Hexapods also have fat body cells. Fat body cells are cells that group up into yellow, what we call fat bodies. Fat bodies being collections of fat, and they are for food storage, but they also have detoxification duty. So they can also detoxify chemicals for them, which means that not only are these fat bodies similar to fat in humans, but they're also analogous to the liver. They have liver-like functions. There are some insects that, once they become adults, no longer eat. Those insects stay alive without eating by living off of their fat bodies. So it's the fat body cells that provide them the nutrients for their metabolism. Here's a good picture of a crane fly, and there's those halteres. So those are modified hind wings. So even though it looks like they only have a single pair of wings, they got two pairs of wings. Okay, exhibited by hexapods and various other arthropods is metamorphosis. Most arthropods undergo some kind of metamorphosis. Think of it as going from larva to adult. Right? We have incomplete metamorphosis versus complete metamorphosis. In incomplete metamorphosis, the egg hatches into what we call a nymph. A nymph kind of looks like a miniature adult. In general, they'll undergo a set number of molts before they become an adult. We call these instars. So a first instar is recently hatched. A third instar or a fourth instar is likely getting very close to adult, depending on what species it is. Complete metamorphosis does not have nymphs, so you do not use the word instar to describe them. Instead, you have a larval form that hatches out of the egg, and that larval form grows but stays as that distinct larval form. Think caterpillar. It lives, it grows, it molts, it gets larger and gathers nutrients, and then must undergo complete metamorphosis to become an adult. So, that complete metamorphosis occurs inside a structure produced by the larvae, generally referred to as a pupa or a chrysalis. A chrysalis is um, what we think of when we say a butterfly cocoon. So it's where you attach the structure to something and secrete it around the whole body. A pupa is more like a little silken covering that you wrap around the full body. Either way, you create a structure to surround you. Um, so it surrounds the larva, and then the larva develops. It undergoes metamorphosis inside the chrysalis or pupa. That's kind of cool because uh, they liquefy, right? So most of their body liquefies and becomes this gel-like fluid. And then certain cells activate in the gel-like fluid in order to reconstruct the arthropod into its adult form. And then it emerges from the pupa as an adult. Organisms that undergo organisms that undergo nymph stages, right? Incomplete metamorphosis can include crickets. It includes mites, spiders, um, mantids, crickets, roaches. Where's my pen? Come back here. There we go. Roaches, mites, spiders. Whoa. Whatever. Mantids. A variety of different organisms undergo incomplete metamorphosis. So, um, it's actually fewer species. Cicadas are a big one. It's summer right now, so cicadas are undergoing incomplete metamorphosis. They have nymphs. Um, Dragonflies have nymphs, even though their larval form can look very different. They do not produce a cocoon or a pupa. Whereas with complete metamorphosis, uh, everyone thinks of butterflies and moths, but actually it's about 88% of arthropod species that undergo complete metamorphosis. Flies, right? Butterflies and moths, beetles, uh, just to name a few. So, lots of different species undergo complete metamorphosis versus incomplete metamorphosis. On to crustacea. If you think of an aquatic arthropod, you are probably thinking of a crustacean. Lobsters, crayfish, shrimp, crabs, water fleas, copepods, barnacles, almost all are aquatic. So they have some constraints to living on land. They cannot, most of them do not colonize land because they lack a cuticle. So a lot of arthropods have a waxen cuticle. I left out the A for funds, I guess. And that protects them from water loss on land. And crustaceans, all crustaceans have gills. So we have constraints to living on land. That does not mean that there are no land crustaceans. Some famous land crustaceans, there are a variety of different land crabs. Hermit crabs colonize land pretty well. Coconut crabs. So there's a variety of land crabs. And then, of course, there's the roly-poly. The roly-poly is what we call an isopod crustacean. If you want to know why roly-polies live, right there, if you lift up the grass, you find them in that moist, soily area. It's because they require a large degree of moisture in order to live, because roly-polies have gills. These crustaceans are the only arthropods with two pairs of antennae. So they have two pairs of antennae. They tend to have complicated mouth parts. So if you look at a crab or a lobster or a shrimp eat, they have a large number of complicated paired mouth parts for mechanically crushing and chewing their food. So, pretty cool. When looking at the body segments, again we have tagmata, fused body segments. So again we see the cephalothorax, the fusion of the head and mid-body segment. So the head and all its sensory structures is fused with the thorax where the legs, the walking appendages, attach. They have a variety of appendages. Um, Kind of interesting to the crustaceans is that they will have swimming appendages on the abdomen. They have abdominal appendages associated with locomotion. So, most often in the form of swimming appendages. All of the arthropods we talked about before this do not have any abdominal appendages. All their appendages attach at the thorax or cephalothorax. Uh, so, this is a major feature of the crustaceans, a differentiating feature of the crustaceans, if you will, if you had to figure something out on an exam. So they have mandibles in their mouths, which are for chewing. Where am I? Okay, yeah, come here. Where'd I go? Ah, found you. Chewing mandibles. So they have a variety of complicated mouth parts associated with mechanical processing and generally two large or a pair of large mandibles for chewing food. And that is the arthropods. Hooray, arthropoda! What? And I'll be back shortly with the next animal diversity lecture in which we get into the echinoderms and the chordates. Bop, bop. Looks like my mic is still on. That's good.